My mother met me at the front door and told me the family had decided I didn't live there anymore. I had just come back from 2 years in Nairobi. My daughter Maya was standing next to me, holding her backpack straps, watching my mother through the screen door with the particular stillness of a child who is paying close attention and pretending not to be. My mother said, "You need to find your own situation." She said it through the screen. She did not open it. What she had apparently never read, in the 2 years since my father died, was the trust amendment he had executed 18 months before his death, the one that named me co-beneficiary of a $247,000 investment account she controlled as trustee. She could not distribute a single dollar of it without my consent. I'm Lena. Every week, I bring you stories about women who are told they have nothing and turn out to have been holding something all along. Subscribe and leave a comment. Has your family ever locked you out of something they thought was theirs to control? I used to think that the cruelest things people do to you are the dramatic ones, the betrayals you see coming, the arguments that end in raised voices and doors. I was wrong. The cruelest thing my family did was practical. It was a decision made without me, delivered through a screen door, in a calm voice, on a Tuesday afternoon in November. The cruelty was in the efficiency of it, in the fact that no one opened the door. I worked as a project coordinator for an international nonprofit. I had spent the previous 2 years in Nairobi managing logistics for a food security program, supply chains, intake rosters, field deployment schedules, forms in 3 languages. I was not a woman who was intimidated by documents. I was a woman who understood, at a cellular level, that the document is where the real thing lives. Before I left for Nairobi, my father's attorney had mailed me a sealed envelope with a certified copy of the trust amendment, and a handwritten note from my father that said, in his careful handwriting, "Keep this somewhere safe." I had kept it. It had been in my carry-on for 2 years, in a sealed envelope inside a folder, inside the main compartment. It traveled through 3 countries with me. I had not opened it because I had not needed to, until now. There's something I want to tell you about the Nairobi years, because they are part of why the screen door did not break me. I had lived, for 2 years, in conditions that required a different relationship with security than most people ever develop. The work was meaningful, and it was hard, and it demanded a kind of functional calm that goes deeper than temperament. The kind that comes from understanding that if you are not calm, things fall apart, and people don't eat, and the wrong documents go to the wrong distribution point. I had learned in Nairobi that the person who keeps their head when everything is confusing is the person who knows what the next step is. The screen door on the Meyerland porch was confusing. I knew what the next step was. I had the carry-on at my feet. The carry-on had been with me for the full 2 years. I had taken it on field visits to remote distribution sites, through the Nairobi airport 6 times, through the layover terminals in 3 other cities. The sealed envelope from Felix had been in the main compartment since it arrived. I had transferred it from my temporary mailbox to the carry-on the same day it came, because the carry-on was the thing I would always have with me. My father had written, "Keep this somewhere safe." The carry-on was somewhere safe. I thought about him during those 2 years sometimes. He had died 7 months into my deployment, quickly, of a cardiac event, without much warning. I had flown home for the funeral and back within a week, because the program could not afford a longer absence, and because Howard, I think, would have understood. He had always understood the requirements of commitment. He had been a man who showed up to things, who finished what he started, who understood that the document is the thing, because without the document, you are at the mercy of whoever speaks loudest in a room. He had written the trust amendment 18 months before he died. That means he had written it 6 months into my deployment. He had been thinking about this while I was in Nairobi. He had been thinking about what might happen when I came home. The warning had been there, if I had read it with the right attention. My brother called 6 weeks before my return to ask about my travel dates and whether I had sorted out housing. I said I was staying with Mom for a month as arranged. He said, right, in a tone that did not match the words. He said it in the same voice he used when he already knew the answer and was asking anyway for reasons of his own. The second sign came in the final 2 weeks before I landed. My mother stopped responding to my logistics texts entirely. I was trying to coordinate suitcase shipping, Maya's school enrollment paperwork, the transit from the airport. She had responded to every previous message, even the ones that required only a short acknowledgement. In the last 2 weeks, nothing. I arrived at the house at 4:15 p.m. My mother came to the front door and stood behind the screen. The porch was warm in the November way that Houston sometimes manages, the afternoon shade taking the edge off the heat, the neighbor's lawn freshly cut, the smell of grass. Maya stood beside me with her backpack and her rolling suitcase and her precise, watchful silence. My mother said, "We have all decided you don't live here anymore. You need to find your own situation." I asked if I could come inside. She said there was no room. I asked if Maya could use the bathroom. She said there was one at a gas station 2 blocks over. I looked at my daughter, who had not reacted visibly. Then I looked at my carry-on, which was at my feet. Then I said, "Okay." I called Felix Ibarra from the driveway. The hotel near Greenway Plaza had clean rooms and a room service menu that included chicken tenders, which was the information that mattered most to Maya. She ordered them and watched a nature documentary about penguins. I sat on the bed with my carry-on open and the sealed envelope in my hands for a long time before I opened it. The certified copy of the trust amendment was 4 pages. I had read it once, 2 years earlier, when it arrived in Nairobi, and I had filed it, and I had not read it again. I read it now, twice. Then I called Felix. The morning after the screen door, I called Felix before Maya was awake. It was early. I had not slept more than an hour. The hotel room had a window facing east, and the Houston sunrise was orange and flat, and I sat on the edge of the bed in the early light, and I told Felix everything in sequence. The door, the screen, the gas station suggestion, Maya watching. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "I'll have the letter drafted by noon." Then he said, "How are you?" I said, "I have what I need." He said, "Yes, you do." I have thought about that exchange many times since. How are you? I have what I need. It was not the answer to the question he was asking. He was asking about me, not about the trust document. But it was the only answer I had that morning, and it was also, I think, the correct one. I was the person who had kept the envelope somewhere safe. I was the person who had called Felix from the driveway. I was the person who had looked at Maya and said, "Okay." Whatever my mother had been trying to take from me by closing that door, she had not taken the thing I needed. It was in my carry-on. It had always been. Maya asked me, on our second morning at the hotel, whether we were going to have to go back to Africa. I said no, we were staying in Houston. She asked if we were going to live with Grandma. I said we were going to find our own place. She said, "Is our own place good?" I said yes. She said, "Will I have my own room?" I said absolutely. She said okay, and went back to her room service pancakes. She was 10 years old. She had lived on 2 continents. She knew how to pack efficiently and how to adapt to new schools and how to ask the one question that mattered, "Is this place good?" I told her yes. I meant it. I was going to make it true. My father's name was Howard Goss. He had been a careful man. This was how Felix described him the first time we spoke, and I had taken it as the highest compliment Felix could have offered. Howard had amended his revocable living trust 18 months before he died, adding me as co-beneficiary of a separately titled investment account. The amendment was precise. Dorinda, as surviving trustee, had full administrative authority, but she could not make discretionary distributions from the investment account without the consent of the co-beneficiary. Without my consent. Texas Trust Code Section 113.029 required her to deal impartially with all beneficiaries. She had, in the space of one Tuesday afternoon, expelled me from the family home while simultaneously exercising sole control over an account that required my cooperation to distribute. It was, Felix said, a trustee duty conflict. He would document it in a formal letter to Dorinda's attorney within 48 hours. Felix Ibarra had represented my father for years. He had mailed me the envelope in Nairobi, which meant he had known this day might come, or at least that my father had believed it might. When I asked Felix whether my father had anticipated this, he was quiet for a moment. He said, "He was a careful man." That was all. I did not press him. I understood what he was saying. The letter reached Dorinda's attorney on a Wednesday. Her attorney called Felix on Thursday. By Friday, a formal meeting had been requested. I was told, through Felix, that Dorinda had asked her attorney twice whether the amendment was really binding. Her attorney confirmed, both times, that it was. The language was clear. The notarization was valid. Howard had been in full capacity at execution. There was nothing to contest. The conversation shifted from whether I had standing to how the distribution would be structured. Meanwhile, I enrolled Maya in a Houston school from the hotel. I called my nonprofit's headquarters and arranged a remote work designation for the transition period. I found a property management listing for a 2-bedroom apartment in Montrose and signed a 6-month lease on the basis of a video tour and my own judgment that hardwood floors and a small balcony were a good indication of general maintenance. I did these things in sequence, one per day, without drama. My mother did not call during this period. Her attorney managed all communication. I found this restful. The beneficiary acknowledgement signing was at Felix's office on a Thursday in December, a gray afternoon, the kind that makes downtown Houston look like a different city. Dorinda's attorney signed on her behalf. Dorinda herself was not present. The document confirmed my co-beneficiary status and the structured distribution schedule. 3 installments over 8 months, totaling $98,800, which was my 40% of the account's discretionary distributions under the amendment's explicit terms. The remaining 60% remained under Dorinda's administrative control, as the amendment specified. Felix slid the final page across the desk. I signed it. I held the pen the way I always hold a pen when what I'm signing matters, steady, without rushing, making sure the signature is clear. When I walked out of the office, the November sun had gone behind the buildings and the street was in shadow. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment. I thought about my father sitting in this same office, or an office like it, downtown Houston, the same November light, and writing the words, "Keep this somewhere safe," in his careful handwriting, putting the note in an envelope, sealing it, giving it to Felix to mail to a woman who was working in Nairobi. He had known she would come home eventually. He had arranged for something to be waiting. Let me tell you about the closing, the formal acknowledgement signing at Felix's office, in a little more detail, because it is the scene that resolved everything, and it did so quietly. The office was on the 15th floor of a downtown building. The elevator opened onto a hallway with good carpet and the subdued lighting of a place where serious things happen without drama. I had been here once before, just before I left for Nairobi, when Felix had explained the trust amendment to me. I had not fully absorbed it at the time. I had been preoccupied with the departure, with the logistics of the deployment, with making sure Maya's school records were in order. I had put the envelope in the carry-on and gotten on the plane. Felix had prepared the acknowledgement document himself. It was 4 pages. It cited the amendment's language precisely, confirmed the distribution schedule, and included the specific clause that required my written consent for future discretionary distributions. Dorinda's attorney had signed on her behalf the day before, which meant I was signing last. Felix slid the document across the desk. I read every page before I signed, not because I doubted any of it, but because that is what my father would have done. He would have read every page. He was a careful man, and careful men read every page. I signed with Howard's Cross pen, which I had taken from his desk when I cleaned out his study after the funeral. It was the only thing I had asked for. It had his initials engraved on the barrel. I had been carrying it in my coat pocket for 2 years, in the same coat that had been with me in Nairobi, in the Houston airport, on the Meyerland porch. I used it to sign the acknowledgement. I thought he would have appreciated that. Felix said, "That's everything." I said, "Thank you." He said, "Your father trusted you to keep that envelope somewhere safe." I said, "I know." He said, "He was right." I put the pen back in my pocket and took the elevator down. I found the apartment in Montrose on a Monday. 2 bedrooms, one for Maya, one for me. The balcony was exactly the right size for a plant, which Maya selected at a garden center on our second day there. A small succulent she named, without hesitation, Gerald. I did not ask why. Some things you let a 10-year-old decide unilaterally. The 3 installments arrived on schedule. Between them, I did not contact my mother. I did not contact my siblings, both of whom had been in the house when the screen door was closed and had said nothing. In the spring, Dorinda sent a birthday card to Maya's school address. She had found it somehow, which did not surprise me. Maya showed me the card. I said, "She's your grandmother. You can write back if you want." Maya considered this for a full week, with the thorough deliberateness of a child making a real decision. She decided not to. I did not influence the decision. I had learned from my father that the most powerful thing you can do for someone you love is prepare the ground and let them walk it themselves. Felix's letter was thorough in the particular way that letters from careful attorneys are thorough. It cited the specific statutory provisions, documented the timeline, and set out the conflict between Dorinda's actions as trustee and her obligations under Texas Trust Code Section 113.029 without any unnecessary editorial commentary. The facts were sufficient. Dorinda had, on November 14th, expelled a co-beneficiary from the family home while simultaneously exercising unilateral administrative control over an investment account that required that co-beneficiary's consent to distribute. This was the letter's central point. It made no accusation about motivation. It did not need to. Her attorney called Felix the following day. I was not on the call. Felix reported to me afterward, in his efficient way, that the attorney had begun the conversation by suggesting the amendment might be reviewed for interpretation. Felix had said that the language was not ambiguous, and that he was prepared to document that position in any forum the trustee's representative chose. The conversation had moved quickly from interpretation to structure, which is to say, from whether I had standing to how the money would flow. Felix said, "It went the way these things usually go when the document is clear." I asked how they usually go. He said, "They resolve." The 3 installments were $32,933.33 each, totaling $98,800. The first arrived on schedule. I was in my Montrose apartment, which had hardwood floors and a balcony, and by then, the succulent named Gerald on the railing. I saw the transfer notification on my phone while I was making Maya's lunch. I put the phone in my pocket and finished making the sandwich. Some amounts of money you have to feel all at once. Others you have to absorb over time. $98,800 is the latter kind. It arrived in installments, and I received it in installments, the practical reality of one, the steadiness of two, and by the third, the quiet understanding that my father had done this correctly. He had seen what was coming, and he had prepared the ground, and I had walked it. The Montrose apartment became home faster than I expected. Maya decorated her room in 2 days. She had a system for this, developed across multiple moves, involving a sequence of decisions she made in a specific order. First where the bed goes, then the desk, then the books, then everything else. She said it was more efficient that way. I did not know where she had learned to think this way. I recognized it as a quality she had, apparently, arrived with. By the time the second installment transferred, we had been in the apartment for 5 months. I had enrolled Maya in the local school, gotten her settled into a reading program she liked, and arranged our Tuesday afternoons so that she had time for the pottery class she had asked about in Nairobi. I had the remote work arrangement formalized. I had found a grocery store that carried the right brand of tea. I had, in other words, built a life in Montrose, in the deliberate and sequential way I built everything, one thing at a time, in the right order, with documentation when documentation was required. My mother sent Maya a birthday card in June. The handwriting on the envelope was careful and recognizable. Maya showed it to me, and I said what I said. She thought about it for a week and decided what she decided. I respected the decision. I respected it the way my father had respected mine, by preparing the ground and staying out of the way. The people who close doors to you rarely know what is written on the other side of them. My father knew. He had been writing it for years, in careful handwriting, in a sealed envelope, in the interior pocket of a carry-on that traveled through 3 countries without being opened, because the woman carrying it had been told to keep it somewhere safe, and she had. Leave me a comment. Has someone tried to lock you out of something that was already yours? Share this story with someone who needs to hear it today. Thank you for listening.